All right, so as we welcome people in from the waiting room, I'm just gonna briefly introduce myself and we'll take a minute or so for people to log in and join us. My name's Molly Donnellan. I'm the International Studies Major Advisor. So some of you are familiar names or blocks on the call, and it's nice to see you and have you here today. We're just going to give folks a minute or two to kind of join us. We like punctuality, but we also like making sure that everybody can participate. Both very important concepts. And so one thing to note is you will see that you're all muted upon entry. We will have a chance at the end today to interact with our guests and to allow you to ask questions. But we're just going to take a minute or so to let participants join as we hit 4 o'clock here. We're glad you're with. Thanks, Essie, for admitting folks as they come in too. Appreciate it. It's like mission control or like command central. You've got all the different windows and tabs, and if you have different screens too, it's a lot. So we're just, for those of you who just joined us, we're just kind of giving a minute for folks to log into Zoom. This is the International Careers Bootcamp about careers in law. So we're just going to give it, I don't know, maybe another, what do you say, Essie, 30 seconds, and we'll do our intro remarks and get things started. Gotten really good at thumbs up in the last 6 months. All right, I don't see anyone left in the waiting room, but I think, Essie, if folks jump in, if you'd be able to admit them, that would be lovely and greatly appreciated. So again, welcome to you all today for our International Careers Bootcamp about careers in law. We are so honored and excited to have our guests Shabnam Lutfi and Tony Sparks with us today. Both alumni or currently enrolled students from UW-Madison who are very excited to share their breadth of knowledge and expertise about law with you all. I just want to give a little bit of background and structure for how today's event is going to run. This event is being recorded. You will only be recorded if you're speaking. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Essie for just a brief overview of Zoom if you're not familiar with how the structure of Zoom will work for today. Essie, do you want to provide a little more outline?
Sure. Like Molly said, you won't be recorded unless you speak up at some point. So don't worry about having your video on. I think it's really nice, especially for speakers, to see some faces. If you're comfortable turning on your video, then that's great. And you'll notice that you can't unmute yourself. That's to prevent interruptions. If you have any questions throughout this talk, feel free to put it in the chat. And if you have any Zoom specific issues, feel free to private message me or publicly, and I will be there to help out. What else? I think that's it. Did I miss anything?
I think that's the important stuff. If questions, like you said, I think if questions come up, folks can reach out to us. Thank you, Essie. Essie is our technical guru with everything here, and we're very grateful for her support. We're going to start this event by reading our land acknowledgement statement. The University of Wisconsin-Madison occupies ancestral Ho-Chunk land, a place their nation has called Tejope since time immemorial. In an 1832 treaty, the Ho-Chunk were forced to cede this territory. Decades of ethnic cleansing followed when both the federal and state government repeatedly but unsuccessfully sought to forcibly remove the Ho-Chunk from Wisconsin. This history of colonization informs our shared future of collaboration and innovation. Today, UW-Madison respects the inherent sovereignty of the Ho-Chunk along with the 11 other First Nations of Wisconsin. And before we continue, I just invite you all to take moments to reflect on the significance of this statement before we begin our event today. Thank you. Today, Each of our speakers are going to share a bit about their own personal academic background and experiences. They're going to share some recommendations that they might have for pursuing a career in their legal field or in the field they're interested in. And there will be a time at the end of our event for you to ask questions of our speakers and hear for speakers to hear hopefully directly from some of our registrants today. Those of you who may have joined us for the first career conversation notice or career bootcamp, excuse me, will notice that my introduction of our speakers will be much, we're going to allow our speakers more time to introduce themselves. And so without further ado, please join me in welcoming Shabnam Lutfi of Lutfi Legal LLC. Shabnam, if you want to unmute yourself and take it away.
Thank you so much, Molly, for your great introduction. And thank you guys so much for having me. I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to speak with the future leaders of the world. I will certainly do my best to provide some useful information. You took the time to be here, and so I'm hoping that everybody could walk away with a little bit something from this discussion. I am a graduate of the University of Wisconsin Law School, 2011. Feels like yesterday, but it really was a while ago. And I have actively lobbied Congress for immigration reform. I've litigated immigration cases. We have a class action lawsuit filed in San Francisco right now. I've been doing immigration probably almost a decade, and I absolutely love it. And I encourage anybody else who's interested in this field to certainly join. So today I will tell you guys a little bit about what I do every day, how it intersects with other areas of the law, and then maybe end with some lessons from the School of Hard Knocks. I practice immigration law, and so my job for the most part is really helping people to find ways to live and work in the US permanently and legally. So for example, we have dozens of international students here. They come here, they go to study, they fall in love, they meet an American, the two have to find a way to to keep the foreign national here. I actually went through that myself because I was in graduate school and I met my husband, who was an international student in the College of Engineering. And when we got married, we got to figure it out like, well, how do I keep you here? So he was my first case. The other types of cases that we work on are like employment-based cases. So sometimes a company calls us and they say like, I can't find an American that would do this job. So we have to get permission from the government, from the Department of Labor, for the company to sponsor the foreign national. We have to advertise the position to American citizens to make sure that there's no American that wants this job before we can recruit somebody from abroad. So that's another area of immigration we work on. We do work on a ton of temporary visas like H-1Bs, L visas, J visas. If anybody has any specific questions about any of these or something you've heard about immigration, I'm more than happy to answer those. I'm kind of just giving like a skim overview of the things we do in immigration, but if there's like a specific question you have, I'd be happy to talk about that. Another thing that we deal with is sometimes the family wants to adopt somebody from another country. And so we've got to make sure that international adoption takes place and it's according to the Hague Convention. We litigate. If the government is violating the laws, we got to take them to court. We frequently do that. We handle asylum cases, and I'll get into that in a minute. All in all, I think in the world of immigration law, you really, really got to be comfortable with stress. So it is a job that probably is not for everybody. You have to thrive under intense situations. So immigration is like, it's about human lives. So it's not about money. I think a lot of areas of law are dealing with money. It's very transactional. So if you're getting a divorce, it's like, how are we going to separate assets? Who's going to get this part of the, this bank account or this car or this boat? If you're a corporate lawyer, then you got to think about like companies, maybe there's a merger involved. Again, it's about assets, it's about money. Immigration is not about money, it's about lives. So the stakes are high, the magnitude of what's at stake is high, and people are putting their lives in your hand and kind of trusting them that you're going to get them out of a tough situation. And this is especially true for our asylum cases. Basically, when somebody's filing for asylum, they're saying like, they're telling you, I'm running for my life, that I'm coming to the United States to seek refuge. So, you know, and I think immigration is wonderful, but if you wanted to still have a part of it without being an immigration attorney, we're always looking for country condition experts. So maybe you're studying international studies and you have an expertise in Honduras, you have an expertise in Guatemala, you have an expertise in, you know, Laos, whatever country. We are always looking for somebody that's a country conditions expert and can write a letter, an affidavit that says, you know, I know the details of Honduras, I know the gangs that are involved there, and what this person is saying absolutely 100% matches up. So that's something else that we're always seeking. Another thing with immigration law is that we're always dealing with people moving from one country to another, and so a lot of times they have to bring their assets over. So maybe they have like the equivalent of, I don't know, $200,000 in China, and they've got to get that money to the United States. That money has to be transferred legally. And I don't know if you're interested in like international economics or finance, but that could be an area that you'd want to pursue. Oftentimes this area is regulated by OFAC regulations. So that's the OFAC stands for Office of Foreign Assets Control, and it's under the US Treasury. If you're interested in that area, I would encourage you to look there for jobs. We also deal with public health, because when you want to come to the US, you have to take a medical exam. You have to show that you don't have a communicable disease. You don't have hepatitis, tuberculosis, gonorrhea, chlamydia, and so forth. So there's an intersection there. There are a dozen of organizations that are making sure that people have access to vaccines and healthcare. So I think if I was an international studies major, I would think there's a world of opportunities out there for me. And there's just so many paths. There's also the State Department is another place to consider looking at. You can be a foreign services officer. And basically you got to take a test, the Foreign Services Officer's test, but you could be a consular officer abroad at a US embassy or consulate, in which case I want to be your best friend, because I got to know, we're frequently speaking with consulate officers who are looking at visa applications, and we're saying like, you know, we gave you the birth certificate, we gave you the passport, what else is needed? I'm trying to schedule an interview with you as a consular officer. So if you're interested in that path, I encourage you to look at the State Department. And at US embassies, it's not just consulate officers they need. I shouldn't say consulate, it's consular officers. They need management officers there, people who are going to be stationed in like Abu Dhabi or, you know, Ankara, Yerevan. Those are three places where I know the US has embassies. You need consular officers there, but we also need people to manage those facilities, and you would have to be the person to make sure the rent for the US embassy is paid, the water is running, the electricity is running, there's storage facilities available. You would coordinate all of that. And there's another track, I think there's 5 tracks you can pick from, but you could also be a political diplomat. You know, you represent the United States for US citizen services or other things that are going on. And I'm just thinking, you know, before I went to law school and during law school, I taught Persian at UW. And I remember so many of our students were interested in working for the CIA or the DIA, which is like the secret service of the CIA, is called the DIA, and how a lot of students ended up going to work for the State Department, for these services, these secret service agencies. So there are places to look at as well. While I was in law school, I studied in Tanzania, and I had a chance to visit the United Nations office in Arusha. And I was actually just Googling Arusha to make sure that I had the name and the location correct. But I noticed that there were a ton of job postings there. So definitely look at that if you're looking for like the United Nations. They have an office in Tanzania. It really is a gem. Like people view Tanzania as a third world country. I think they kind of like the rest of the world looks at it that way because it keeps it really pristine. But I just remember being there and thinking, my goodness, this is a really beautiful place. And I would love an internship here. And they also have internships in The Hague that they had posted. So those are, I mean, after having worked all these years, I would just say that there's plenty of opportunities, and they're not as distant as they seem to be. I'm not saying you can get hired overnight. What I'm trying to say is that opportunities are within reach and they're attainable. So I will quickly just talk about some of my top lessons from my school of hard knocks. I don't want to sugarcoat things, and I just want to be real about it. So my first lesson I would share that I've learned is that nobody will care about your career as much as you do. No one is invested in your career as much as you are. I think when you're a student, your life is really structured by semesters and curriculums, and the curriculum and the semester is like the driving force in your life. But once you get out of school, like that structure is just not there anymore. And it can be tough for some people to make that transition. And I'm just going to give you an example. So when I wanted to start my firm, I knew that I had no experience, and if I didn't have a mentor, I was going to end up in jail, possibly sued for malpractice and disbarred. So I needed a mentor, and I emailed all the immigration attorneys in Madison, hoping that somebody would be my mentor. Half the people did not respond. So if you get rejected, you just got to brush that aside. Some people were very flaky and said they would help, but never really did. And then there was one woman who said, I will be your mentor. And so what do you want from me? And I was really stunned at that question, because I thought, well, you're the mentor. I think you should tell me what I should want from you. And I called my sister-in-law to ask her, like, what do I say? She's asking me what I want. And my sister-in-law said to me, tell her exactly what you want. What is this mentor relationship you want? And I said, okay. I thought about it, and I responded saying, I've got a couple of cases I've been hired for, and before I submit them, I would like you to review them. I want to meet with you every Monday, as an example, at 9 a.m. at Panera's, and I will bring an agenda, and I will provide a summary of the case and the questions for that case in advance. And I sent that out, and she said, absolutely. We hit it off well. But I think the key that got me that relationship, one, is reaching out, but also being very clear on what I'm looking for from someone else. And that means being in the driver's seat. The next thing I would add, my number 2, is you really got to give yourself a chance to figure out who you are and what you're good at. I think people are often searching the outside world to tell them where they fit in, but you have to search within yourself. I think that there were plenty of times in my younger days where I felt a lot of social pressure. I had to do what my parents expected me to do. And there were certainly days where my parents said, immigration law, like that's useless. What a waste of a college law degree. And so, you have to walk your own, you have to dance to your own song. Everybody's different. What fits you, it doesn't fit somebody else, and you cannot try to make other people happy. Like that is the wrong recipe. It's the recipe for disaster. So one thing that I found helpful is the Gallup strengths-based leadership test. If you've ever taken it, I think you have to pay $20. Everybody at our firm has taken it. And the reason we do it is because we want to identify what our natural talents are, and I want to amplify that. You're never going to make it in life if you're always swimming upstream. You got to find out what you're good at, and you want to bring that. And it can certainly take time to figure that out. Failing, I think, is also the fastest way to success, because failure is what tells you, like, this is not the job for me. And by knowing that this is not the job for me, you're just one step closer to the job that is for you. And I think failing is just like riding a bicycle. You just get used to it. You fall so many times. I just like 2 seconds and it doesn't even hurt. The first time it hurts a lot, but after a while, you don't even feel anything anymore. So figure out what you're good at, find your natural talents. Sometimes these personality tests can certainly help. My next tip, I think I still have time, networking. Networking is a fancy way, in my opinion, of saying be nice. And what I mean by that is, like, networking has this really business-like, very complicated ring to it. And I just think networking is just being nice to people. So, when I go to the post office every day, I say, like, hey, Mark, how are you? How's your family doing? I drive home, I go to check the mail, I see Nancy across the street. Hey, Nancy, how's teaching going? you know, just the other day, I said to my other neighbor, we started chatting, and I said, I can't find somebody to help with a patio. We really want to build a patio. And she said, you got to call Greg. I was like, okay, who's Greg? I'll give him a call. She gave me the number. I called Greg. I have a patio now. And not only do I have a patio, I also know Greg. And Greg, if somebody else asks me, I need a patio, I'm going to say, you got to call Greg. So I have never gotten a job through a website. Every single job I've gotten, and I've been working 3 decades, has always, always, always been that somebody knew somebody who knew somebody who just connected us. So to me, your network is your friends, but it's also your friends' friends. And you build your network by just being nice to people. I mean, that's the biggest secret to networking, is like, just be nice. And that kind of leads me to number 4, which is like, embrace your extrovertedness. I think extroverts have a slight advantage in this area, because I think I've met introverts who say it's really, really hard. Like, they don't like reaching out to people. It just makes them want to puke. But you really have to do it. You got to get over it. I hired one person once, and she said to me that writing an email to you to introduce myself was like the hardest thing I ever did. But I'm so glad I did it. We've been best friends for like 5 years now, and it just took one email. So I would say definitely, you know, don't be shy and reach out to people. You have nothing to be worried about. You can only open up doors. Luckily, if you're looking for a job in the middle of a pandemic, you really don't have to meet them in person. You can just meet them in your bedroom. So I think that's a great help for some people. I've hired people during the pandemic. I got an email from a UW student. She's a senior. She wrote a really nice email, and she told me exactly what she wanted. And it was just perfect. She said, I'm a UW, I'm a senior, I've worked in a law firm before. I'm looking for 10 hours of work a week. You know, I want to learn about immigration. And if you need me to copy for you, if you need me to file, if you need me to draft documents, enter data, whatever it is, I'll do it. And so we hired her. I think luck had a little bit to do with that, because it turned out that one of our other employees was on leave, and we had an empty desk, an empty office, and a laptop sitting there, and it worked out well. So the next thing I would say is, if you do get a job, you got to give it more than 6 months. You won't know if it's the right fit for you or not. It takes time to know your boss. It takes time to know all the acronyms that everybody's using. Give yourself an opportunity to see if it's the right fit, but also definitely stay away from toxic places and toxic people. If you have a boss that's angry all day in a place where nobody really wants to show up and people just look really miserable, I just don't think it's worth hanging out. And I would definitely ask for a job interview, like, what's your company culture like? Do people like their jobs? What is your turnover rate? I mean, if people are coming in and out really quickly, there's something wrong with that place, and you shouldn't be there. The next thing is number 7 on my list, is there is so much more to you than what's on your resume. So I remember hating law school. I remember hating myself through law school. I remember thinking, like, I'm not in the top 10% of my class. I'm never going to get a job. I'm never going to be a lawyer. And I kind of started my practice with the goal that I could prove that I'm not going to be a good lawyer and I could just walk away from this field. Luckily, it turned out I had a lot of skills that people wanted, but they weren't on my resume. Being a good listener, caring about people, communicating with your client, you know, I could certainly find the answer to the problems. Not in a timed 60 minutes exam format, but in another setting. So your resume is important, and it says certain things about you, but there's a lot more skills and abilities you offer than just what's on your resume. And I think between 2 equal applicants, I'm looking for personality. I'm looking for somebody who's genuine, who's authentic. I can teach the law, but I can't teach a person to be honest and to care, go the extra mile when we're in a crunch. Those are things that, you know, you just bring to the table. On a side story, I wanted to mention there's this book by Daniel Pink that's called The Surprising Truth About What Motivates Us. You're welcome to read it, or you could just find a summary of it on Google. which is what I did. But basically what it's telling you is that research tells us people are motivated by 3 things: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Autonomy is like, I want to be a little bit independent. I can't be micromanaged every second of every day. Mastery, we all want to be awesome at something. And purpose, we want the work that we do to have some bigger meaning in the world than just, a paycheck. I kind of feel like I'm there and I love what I do. But when you do what your passion is, it's not true that it's like you'll never work a day in your life. It's that you will work harder than you've ever worked in your life, because what's motivating you is your love for the job, the love for what you're doing. And that's kind of the coolest thing in the world, even though it's incredibly exhausting. It's just the best. Nothing is more rewarding than doing good work that has purpose. My final story, and I'm just about done, is I would say be brave. Be brave, be brave, be brave. When, the current president was inaugurated in 2017, the very first thing he did a week later is to sign into law a Muslim ban. And I knew a lot of people from those Muslim countries. And I remember thinking like, oh my God, what are we gonna do? There are people on planes that are gonna come over and be deported right away. And I thought like, I gotta find a way to get people to be connected so everybody knows what's going around. So I created this Facebook group called Immigrants United. And I remember kind of like shaking while I'm doing it, because I thought this is a disaster and everybody's gonna laugh at me. But I did it anyways. And within like 2 days, there were 5,000 people in this group and everybody was telling each other about what's going on in the airports. And like a week later, we had 15,000 people in the group. So I just think about these moments in my life, and I'll tell you another one where I'm just like shaking because I'm like, I don't want to mess up. I don't want to be embarrassed. I don't want to be judged. But if you can be brave in a moment and you have purpose to what you're doing, the world kind of like rewards you for that. Our firm noticed that in 2018, the government was doing something illegal and that nobody was doing anything about it. Like they weren't letting people come to the US who are allowed to come. And I remember thinking like the ACLU is not doing anything about this. There's no other organization doing it. I'm going to sue the president. But at the same time, like, what are you doing? I've been in and out of law school for 10 years. Who am I to sue the president? And I was like, you know what? Everybody in this world can screw up. I'm allowed to screw up too. People do worse things. I'll fall flat on my face, but I've fallen flat on my face 100 times before. I'm kind of used to it. So we filed this lawsuit. And next thing I knew, there were like 20 other lawyers from around the country saying, I want in on this. And we ended up building a coalition of lawyers of like 20, 30 people who were like influential, big people who have kind of taken over, but we're still a part of it. And I just remember those moments where I just was like shaking, but thinking this is the right thing to do. I'm going to do it. And when I put that out into the world, other people who are trying to do the same thing will find you and help you. So that's all I have to say. I wish you would, you guys are the future leaders. You got to find out what's the right place for you. It can certainly take time, but you absolutely 100% can do it. And the world needs you to do it. We're counting on you.
Thank you so much, Shabnam. That was, there was so much to take from what you shared. I'm thankful for your honesty, and I think it's really powerful what you said about allowing yourself the grace to grow through fearlessness in what can be like an intimidating process and everything that comes along with that. And fearlessness being willing and ready to make a mistake and to fail, but to know that that's where you are, what you are driven to do. What you said about autonomy and mastery and purpose, I think can be really helpful for our students as they're thinking about how to approach a career in a vast field. And if you have just a couple minutes here to maybe answer a couple questions that we have, and then Tony will move to your section of the event. When I think of law, someone who is not in the legal field, that it's a lot. I think of everything from like Boston legal to, to like court cases and corporate law, or I mean, there's so many different layers or fields or places that you can end up. And one of our students was submitted a question about how does one go about picking a career in law? What does that mean? What might that process look like? Or what did it look like for you? When, did you realize throughout law school, did you have time to develop what your interests were or learn what you were passionate about? Or at what point might a student decision?
I think you really have to, well, for me personally, I was just interested. It was, my dad kept saying, you got to go into healthcare law. That's the future. And I kept saying, like, I'm not interested in healthcare law. It just doesn't fit. I don't know. He's like, well, you got to be a corporate lawyer. You got to, have a living. Dad, I hate corporate law. I'm going to be miserable in that job. I don't want to do it. But I know a lot of people in the international community, and none of them ask me about divorce. None of them ask me about real estate. Nobody's asking about like criminal law. Everybody's saying like, how can I get my green card? And I think I tried it. And I told myself, you got 6 months, give it 6 months to a year. If you don't like it, switch. But you have to try it. And then it turned out I liked it. And people told their friends, and friends told their friends. Had something come up and I thought this is not for me, I would have tried something else that I like.
So is that an option then for students when you're thinking about a specialization or a field that you're going to go into? Is it and this is coming from a place of ignorance, this is genuinely me not knowing. Can you switch fields once you have your JD, once you have your, or once you pass the bar? Is there flexibility in, I'm going to try this field, but 10 years later, I want to switch to this, and what might that look like?
So we just get law degrees, and where you specialize or whether you even do specialize, that's your decision. There's other attorneys I know who are general practitioners, and they don't want to specialize. They want to do a little bit of family law. They want to do a little bit of criminal law. They want to do a little bit of real estate. They got a hat in every game. I don't have that personality. I can't remember that many areas of law. My personality is I want to master one small area. But there are certainly people who do, who've got all sorts of different laws that they're juggling.
And I imagine it's similar then in when you think about international law, it's all those similar fields that you could practice domestically, but on a global scale, right? And so when you think about what is international law, it can be environmental law or economic and trade law or law, and that kind of same breadth of opportunities, just on a global scale. I have one more quick question for you, and then we'll move on to Tony's part. One of our submitted a question about what advice would you give to your younger self? You spoke about that a little bit in your section, but you also mentioned that it is a high stress job, particularly immigration law, because you're dealing with the human element. What did you do to make sure that your health was your priority?
Well,
or if it wasn't, and maybe that's the reality of it, was that in the process of it, you also learned how to balance, or life taught you how to balance, or and maybe not,
I don't know. I really don't know. I was born in the middle of a war, and so my parents were kind of leaving a war zone, coming to the US, and I feel like a lot of that stress I inherited, and I'm generally a stressed, anxious person. So so stressful environments are my norm. It's very normal for me to be like shaking all day long. So, but as far as managing stress, we laugh a lot. Oh my gosh, all of us, we get off the phone with a client who's screaming, because we're not going to scream at the client. They're tense. They're the ones who are going through a lot. We have to absorb that stress for them. But then I gotta release it. We gotta joke around about it. We gotta laugh. We gotta maybe switch a client with another lawyer because the personality doesn't work well. I love working with people that I enjoy their company, and that I think that's been helpful a lot.
it's key, the people you surround yourself with, and how that, and you spoke about that too, how the work culture plays into your sense of belonging and fulfillment in the career you choose.
The one other thing that I would tell my younger self is cowards point fingers. Cowards say, I'm not where I'm supposed to be in life because it's somebody's fault. My parents' fault, my life's fault, something went wrong. I didn't have the money, I didn't have the resources. Winners don't do that. They overcome every obstacle. They're too curious, they're too driven to want to achieve that you don't have time to point fingers. I never met one person who's successful that had it easy. It's not easy. But if you want to be a winner, you've got to take the hits, you got to get beaten, and you got to get back up, and you got to keep going. And that's how winners work. They don't point fingers.
And that's a great perspective to when we're in a situation like we are now, where things are outside of your control, or things that might have a big impact on your life seem like they're outside of your control, is to reframe that perspective of what's next, moving on. What can I do? What control can I take? And action can I take? That's very valuable. Thank you so much. If you'll stick around, I have lots more questions, and I can imagine that our students and our guests do for you as well. And so at this point, we're going to move to Tony Sparks. Tony is a third-year law student and advising fellow in the UW Center for Pre-Law Advising. And I'll throw the link to that in the chat for everybody to reference later as well. Tony is a veteran of the US Air Force who is interested in military, administrative, and corporate law. Without further ado, I will hand it over to Tony.
Hello, everybody. I'm Tony, and like was said, I'm in my third year of law school. So unlike Shabnam, my optimism isn't very high right now. So I'm sorry for that. I'm pretty tired most of the time, and it's a lot of work, and it feels like it's just never going to end. But it will soon. So a little about myself. I graduated from the University of Iowa about 2010, and then afterwards I went into the United States Air Force, where I was a Persian Farsi airborne linguist. So after basic training and all of that being yelled at and everything, I went to the Defense Language Institute, where they taught me Farsi every day, 8 hours a day, with like 4 hours of homework at night for a year. And then because the Department of the Defense didn't have like a strong understanding between Farsi and Dari, I went to a Dari conversion course for a few months, which was just hanging out and learning wa instead of which was like our relaxing time during the whole Defense Language Institute. While I was in the service, I deployed a couple times in support of Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria. I flew on the back of a plane called the RC-135, or the Rivet Joint, and we collected intelligence over those countries. It's all top secret stuff, so I can't like go into exactly how all of that went down. But if you have questions about kind of the crueler side of international studies, I have some experience with the three-letter agencies, like entry-level positions with NSA, FBI, CIA, how those kind of go, and contracting work, like how that works, because most of the time, even after you get out as a veteran with like the type of experience I have, most often you go into the contracting side of things for a while and work from contract to contract if you want to do language studies or be a subject matter expert or program manager or anything like that for the three-letter agencies. After I completed my time in the military, I decided I wanted to go to law school, which was kind of a half-baked idea on my part, to tell you the truth. I didn't necessarily know a lot about being a lawyer, and since going to law school, I've obviously educated myself more on it. And there's a great book for anybody who just wants a very general idea of what it's like to be a lawyer. It's called 24 Hours with 24 Lawyers. And let's see, it's by Jasper Kim. And it's this book that they sit down for 24 hours and they just go through the day of 24 different lawyers in 24 different fields. And yeah, it really opened my eyes up to the different areas of law that exist and what the practicalities of that look like. You know, there are people in this book who are like high flying corporate Washington, D.C. lawyers who are waking up at 3:30 in the morning and going to bed at 1 in the morning, you know, with their like marathon training in between. Just like it, there's crazy. There's the full spectrum, but then there's also like the small town attorneys, you know, in like rural Nebraska, handling like some farm disputes or you know, like little divorces here and there. And so it's a very interesting book. So right now I am in law school. I'm taking the courses that everyone has to take. They are very interesting, but it can be a lot of work. There's a lot of reading, and there is most classes you're just tested once at the end. That's usually a unique thing for undergraduates to hear. There's no like papers throughout to help boost your grade. It's kind of just like you sit there for the semester and you get one shot at it. So needless to say, I'm not great at it. You know, I'm not the top 10% of my class or anything, but I found it's incredibly interesting. I'm very excited to become a lawyer. The last couple summers, I interned with a small law firm up in Waunakee doing mostly administrative law. So they have a lot of cases for the Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims in Washington, D.C. And so when a veteran gets out of the service, you're usually eligible to get some kind of disability, whether like running all the time in the military hurts your knees, or, you know, the more gruesome injuries that can happen. And then the VA turns around and pays you monthly, basically for the rest of your life. And it gets really practical about what limbs missing, for instance, and how much money that's worth every month. And the VA is historically very bad at getting that money to veterans. And so the firm works very hard to ensure that all the veterans are getting the payments that they deserve and have earned. Besides that, I am an advising fellow at the Center for Pre-Law Advising. It is a very useful service, and I recommend it to anybody who is going to apply to law school. As someone who applied to law school just completely blindly, like I have no lawyers in my family, I have no friends really that I could call on the phone and be like, hey, how do I go to law school? Like, what's this all about? The service is incredible. There's 2 advisors that are professionals that'll be there forever, Caroline Fuchs and Janet Mitchell, and they both have their areas of expertise, and they can walk you through your timeline. They will review all your application materials. They'll get you as prepared as they can to get you into the best law school that they can get you into. And obviously, Gabrielle is the other fellow, and myself will do that as well. But we're 3 L's, and we're kind of beginning to get phased out. And so just having those 2 names in your pocket will help a lot if you're looking to apply to law school in the future. And it's a service that's open to you even after you graduate. So if you've spent a few years working, you can always call the Center for Pre-Law Advising, and there'll be an advisor there who will sit down with you and help get your application materials together. If you look into like a similar type of service, like Spivey Consulting is one of the big names in it, and you can spend thousands of dollars to have someone sit down and review your application materials, or like give you a little coaching on your LSAT or any of that. And the university provides that to all of their students and all of their alumni. And so if any of you have any questions about just like the practicalities of applying to law school, like what your timeline looks like, how it's viewed if you spend a few years to make up your mind, like you go get a job and then you want to come back, what that kind of looks like, I'd be happy to answer any questions about any of that.
Thank you so much, Tony. And I'm thankful to both you and Shabnam for your honesty about the rigor of law school. You both, I think, shared the same kind of phrase that neither of you felt like you were in the top 10%. But but what that means in the grand scheme of what you can do and how you can contribute to the field is, I don't want to say irrelevant because that might sound completely like it's washed off the table, but a little bit. If you know what you're doing and you're passionate about what you do and you gain that expertise and that experience, then you can absolutely have a fulfilling career in the field. So thank you both for that. Tony, in your role as a pre-law advisor, if there's one thing that you wanted students to know as they're kind of thinking about law school or preparing for it, what might that be? What is one, like maybe a question you get all the time, or the one thing that you wish you'd really known for any of our students who are considering that?
I think the most important thing you can do is figure out why you want to go to law school, right? Because law school, like Shabnam said, is like the last higher education generalist degree, right? You're going to get your law degree, but there's not really any direction for you to go. You're not necessarily going to have like a concentration in immigration law or administrative law or, civil defense. And so it's a good idea to just like know why you want to be a lawyer, whether it's like you watched Boston Legal and were really impressed, that probably is not enough to get you through 3 years of law school. But I mean, if your motivations are right and you are fully aware of just like the financial costs and just the life cost of taking 3 years away from your life to study law, then you're in a good place to apply and go to law school.
Yeah. Now, in this, in the time of COVID, students are trying to get experiences or internships, or are dealing with the fact that internships have been canceled, or that there are limited opportunities to actually, to physically connect with people, certainly in a networking context, but also just in how you would practice law every day, how you meet with your clients, or even in a courtroom, there's different procedures and precautions. So as students are maybe trying to gain experience in this field, either through an internship to develop themselves professionally, or to just get a sense of if it's something they want to pursue in school, what recommendations, did either of you, and we can open this up to kind of both of you now, but did either of you participate in internships during your time at university? And how did they help you in figuring out your future career? And maybe where should students start if they want to have a similar experience? It's kind of 3 questions in one, 3 pitches in one there. But either of you can jump in as you have an answer to that. So if you participated in an internship, helped you, and then how students could find similar opportunities in a time of COVID.
Yeah, I can speak to that because I'm going through the same thing right now. Like, I'm currently a student and I'm supposed to have a job next year as a lawyer, and there's no like networking events that aren't via Zoom, and so it's just like a lot of cold emails, a lot of looking at job databases and seeing what's available. But as far as like how things normally progress in law school, like your summer law clerk experience or your internship is like a normal part of the legal education. And so usually both your first and your second summer, you will clerk either at a law firm or a government agency or wherever you choose. And then often, but not always and not 100% of the time, where you intern your second summer will often lead to a job offer.
Shabnam, do you have?
I don't know. Sure. I don't know if the world is the same as it was when I went to law school, but I remember having an internship in Washington, D.C. that was unpaid. And I had to take out student loans to pay for the rent and the expenses of living there so that I could offer free labor. But I don't know if that still exists or not. I think I got lucky at the very end. Somebody had dropped that position and I jumped on it very quickly. Internships are important. Opportunities are important. It's really tough right now because you've got COVID. companies are shutting down. They're being very like financially conservative. It's hard. It was hard when I graduated. A lot of people left law. Some of us put up our own shingles. Yeah, it's a tough time to be graduating right now. But I think resilience is underestimated. And if you have a goal in life, you go out there and you get it, you're going to achieve it. I took the LSAT 5 times. I mean, I was determined. I am going to a tier 1 law school, and I didn't have lawyers in the background, but if it took 5 years, it took 5 exams. The first time I took the exam, I think I cried and I walked out. I didn't have the emotional maturity at the moment because I just thought this next 3 hours is going to determine the rest of my life. And you really can't have that type of mindset. You can't allow one aspect of your life to be so significant that it can just, make you fall over. And it took me a while to build that this is just one part of my life. It's not my whole life.
Mm-hmm. Right. Especially when it seems like you've been working toward that. And here it is, this culminating point of that 3-hour exam. And I think you mentioned that earlier too, that like an exam or a paper test does not indicate what you're going to be like as a future professional or lawyer. Yeah, thank you. So as our undergraduate students, are looking to this, and then we can maybe open it up for our students to interact with you directly. As an undergraduate, are there concrete skills that they could be developing that you look for either when you're hiring people or Tony, that law schools are really looking for good communicators or team players or leaders? Are there kind of those broader concrete skills that students could look to develop even through internships that seem unrelated to the legal field?
I mean, I can speak to what law schools generally say. It's always writing and leadership experience is always what they're looking at. And even some schools like Northwestern's, for instance, comes out and says like, we are not going to accept you unless you're a few years out from your undergrad because you haven't had a chance to develop any of these skills, like showing up to work every day at 8 a.m., like is a skill in itself that not everybody has, and so it's just like one of those small bars that you can jump early in life to show like, hey, I show up every day, I do what I'm supposed to do, like I can manage being in law school.
Yeah. And you can have that or practice that as an undergraduate of internship you're at, is that imposing that structure on yourself or that accountability on yourself at an earlier stage. Absolutely. Thanks. Shabnam, do you have thoughts about what really stands out for you? I know you said that personality plays a lot into kind of the work culture that you cultivate at your firm. Are there any other concrete skills that you find are really key in order to have a highly functioning office like that in a high stress environment?
Yeah. We love people who are really good researchers, that are really good writers. We do a lot of forms that you have to write specifically, like the social security number, the A number, the address. And so if you are detail, attention oriented, and can make sure that things are exact, that's important for certain jobs because you can't make a mistake on some things.
Right.
But I think, I don't know, we really, really try hard to match people's personalities to the job, because I don't think it's easy to change personalities. I think it's really, really hard. I could tell myself 1,000 times a day and do a whole bunch of bets with people to wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning every day sharp, and it's just not who I am. I think what I try to do is surround myself with other people who have the strengths that are the yin to my yang, that my weakness balances out with their strength and my strength balances out with their weakness. Because habits are hard to change. For me, it's not, I'll never be able to be 7 o'clock in the morning sharp at work, but the driver is the client. I am deathly afraid of letting somebody down. Like nothing scares me more than losing a case. So I use that as the tool to channel my behavior, because I can't do the other things that I just don't have. I think it's important to know who you are, and maybe surround yourself with people who have the opposite skills that you guys match each other up.
And you can't find that person to kind of complement your strengths and skills unless you know what they are in the first place. Yeah, it'll be a fruitless search otherwise. So thank you both. I have other questions that I can kind of continue to ask if our students are a little shy, but at this time, and Essie, I don't know if you can turn on the feature so students can either unmute themselves or raise their hand to participate, but any of our guests, not just students that we have participating today, can either please feel free to add specific questions in chat, or to kind of unmute yourself and speak up and ask questions directly. So I'll open that, and then it'll be kind of crickets for a second. Oh, we have a hand. Anastasia. Okay, I think you can go ahead and unmute yourself, and I'll lower your hand. Anastasia, go ahead.
Okay, hi. So I have a question for both of you. And I know you had talked a little bit about internships and Subnam, am I saying that correctly?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, had talked about how networking is important, but I wanted to ask some ways that you approach networking, or someone like me personally, I'm interested in a lot of things and I want to network, but sometimes it's about finding the right person or how to approach them. Or like, how do you personally feel about getting like cold emails? I know you spoke about that a little bit, but if you could maybe share a little bit more information on networking and reaching out and trying to connect with people and just figure out what your interests are or what opportunities there are. Thank you.
So the way I approach networking is like, I just think it's really being nice to people. And if I don't know somebody that does a certain thing, I think, do I know anybody who could connect me? So we were trying to figure out if we could do some kind of an investment. And I remember my CPA one time was saying he was trying to do the same thing. So I called him saying like, I'm trying to do this investment thing. You mentioned it like a couple of years ago. Do you know anybody I could talk to? And he said, give Colleen a call. And he gave me Colleen's number. I told her, I'm meeting you because Bob told me to call you. I'm trying to do this investment thing. Are you the right person? And if you're not, do you know anybody who is? You got to give Paul a call. So I called Paul, and Paul's like, I'm your guy. So Paul and I have been working together to figure it out, but it's really just asking friends, like, do you know I'm interested in like biology. Do you know somebody who works in biology? Hey, my friend next door is a chemist, but he might know somebody. And then that's really how I've been able to like find people is, can you help me? If not, do you know somebody who can point me in the right direction? And I'd say 90% of the time, people are really nice. People are helpful.
So maybe just having, when you're writing that email, explaining who you are, why you're contacting them, and what you're looking for in a very flexible kind of message, or with a very flexible kind of tone of, I'm just looking for help. Here's why, and giving them the information they need to be able to help you. Is that like, that's what I'm hearing from you? Is that kind of right, or am I missing?
I would do that. I would certainly do that. Maybe I'm interested in adoption in France, and I Google adoption in France specialist, and it comes up somebody's name, Joe. Hey, Joe, I saw your LinkedIn profile. You're doing this. I'm interested in this. Do you have an opportunity available? If not, do you know somebody else I could talk to? He'll respond. And if he doesn't, don't worry about it. Then you just go to the next guy on the list. Somebody will respond.
That's awesome. Tony, do you have anything to add, or any other suggestions for Anastasia?
Well, it's very difficult right now, just with everything being closed and like minimum staffing at a lot of places and minimum work also. So like a lot of law firms are like limiting what they take in because it limits the amount of people that they have to interact with and everything. I know the university has Handshake. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. it's just like an app widget in your MyUW. And there are people in the community who have like specifically signed up for Handshake for you as a UW student to reach out and be like, hey, what you do seems interesting. Do you want to have some coffee and tell me about it? And most often, I find people are very willing to talk about themselves. Like Shabnam and myself are both here right now to talk about ourselves, you know? And so if you reach out to someone and say like, just tell me about yourself, like they usually are more than willing to just sit down with you and have a conversation.
Thank you. Anastasia, does that answer your question a little bit about how to grab that courage and start formulating emails, or kind of how to start that conversation of reaching out?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Great. I see Henry, you have a hand up. We also had a question in the chat. I want to preface this with, we are coming up on 5 o'clock. So if folks have to head out and have other obligations, we want to be respectful of your time. I think Shabnam and Tony shared that they could stick around for a little longer. And if you can't, then that was my misunderstanding. But if you can, we have a couple other questions, but I do want to be respectful of time. Does that sound okay? Okay, so our first question from the chat, and then Henry, I'll invite you to unmute yourself after that. We had Marina asked, do you have advice on how to keep motivated when it feels like there's a timeline that other people are following, but you're just not as sure of your path as everybody else?
Yes. You're not on the same timeline. We're all going in the same direction in life, but people are at different places. I think Barack Obama became president when he was like 40 something years old. Donald Trump became president when he was over 70. Everybody's at a different pace in life. I have friends who got married at 20 and are divorced at 30, but I have friends who are single at 30 who are angry. They're both at the same place and got their very different ways. Like, you don't have to get married at the same time other people do. You don't have to know your dream passion the same time other people do. It's not a big deal. My brother had kids 10 years before I did, and he's 3 years older. He found his, sweetheart in high school. I found my sweetheart in my 30s. You can't compare.
I think it's really helpful. Thank you for sharing that. I think it's helpful for students to hear that. You can say it, or your advisor can say it, and sometimes it's just you need a different perspective or a different person to share that advice. And so thank you for sharing that. Tony, anything to add or contribute to Marina's question about advice for when it feels like other people, like you're behind on some timeline?
I mean, I felt like I'm behind my entire life, right? But like as time has gone on, like I'm starting to pass those people who knew when they were like 5 what they wanted to do with their life, because there's like a very high burnout rate in people like that. So I think it's like perfectly okay to take your time and like figure out what you want to do with your life before you start doing it. So take your time. It's not a race.
Absolutely. Henry, I'll invite you to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Sure. So I come from sort of a unique scenario. I come from a family of attorneys. My grandfather was an environmental attorney for the Wisconsin DNR, and my other grandfather was a patent attorney. And I spoke with both of them, and they were telling me that the career of law has changed quite a bit. And back in the day, you would go to law school, and by the time you would finish, you would pretty much have a job guaranteed. But today, they were telling me from their experience has been much different. And from what I've been reading, even before the pandemic, there's just been this huge influx of lawyers, so much so that they're having trouble finding a job. So my question being is, if you decide to go through with law school, how do you stand out from all the other people? Because there's only a unlimited amount of jobs and tons of graduates.
Great question. That's a big question, but a great question. So Tony or Shabnam, if you have any thoughts there.
I can try, I guess. Well, like 2008 happened, right? And that's like the recession that everybody talks about. Like you'll meet lawyers who graduated like right in 2008, and they will just tell you horror stories the whole time. And those are often the lawyers you speak to who will tell you like, don't ever go to law school, right? Because they came out, the market was flooded, like everybody was taking very low paying jobs, and it was hard. I mean, it's definitely not the time like that when your grandfather went to law school or your father even. It seems to be getting more competitive, like I don't know, but you have to like carve out your own niche in all of it, right? So there's the traditional way where like you crush undergraduate and then you get your like 180 on your LSAT and you go to Yale, and you intern at the Supreme Court, and like those people have jobs forever, like it seems like those people also burn out obviously. But and then there's the other way where like you want to be a lawyer, you know what you want to do. Like if you want to work at the DNR in Wisconsin, like you absolutely don't need to go to Harvard to do that, right? And so you just like set practical goals and then you go and achieve them.
If I could add, I'm thinking of two quotes. One of them is, "It's not the most intelligent that survive, it's the most adaptable." I think like Darwin said that. And the other one is something, I guess it's attributed to Einstein. The problem with humans is a confusion of goals and a perfection of means. And so what I'm trying to say with that is like, yeah, I graduated law school. There wasn't a single job in the market for me. But the goal was not the job. I thought, well, I'll just put up my own shingle. I'll open up my own law firm because the goal is to practice law. The job is the way to get to the law, to practice the law. And if that job's not available, then I'll be adaptable and I'll just put up my own shingle and be resourceful and get the help I need. So I would say focus on the goal and be flexible in how you get there. Maybe you do an internship temporarily, maybe you do something else temporarily, but don't forget what you're trying to achieve and be flexible in how you get there.
That's great. That's really great advice. I think that's so key. I think we're learning, especially in the pandemic, of that adaptability and flexibility is key, and this is a great time to practice it. And if you really, really want to find a silver lining in what's happening, is it's kind of the world forcing you to find your adaptability and to practice that adaptability. Absolutely. I don't see any other hands raised, but there is one more question in the chat, and it's one that I kind of had written down too, is what the role of world languages might play in the work that you do. So in the field of immigration law, you're working with, I would imagine, communities and people from all over the world who, and in the United States, we do not have an official language. And so, what does the role of language play in the work that you do?
So I started practicing immigration law maybe a year before a couple years before a travel ban was implemented. And in that travel ban, it included Iranians, and I am Iranian American, like by background, and I speak Farsi. So I happen to be in immigration law at the exact time in history when Iranians needed immigration lawyers the most. And it turned out that the language skill was vital at that time. We certainly, and it is right now, but we also certainly always need people who can speak Spanish. We have a ton of clients that speak Spanish. I think that, yeah, language can certainly help. It's very helpful.
For me, I really haven't had the opportunity to use too much Farsi since being in law school. I am in class again. I'm taking a Farsi class through the university just for fun. But I mean, someday it would be great. Like if we stop sanctioning Iran and like business starts growing, it would be awesome to get to just like translate contracts or do anything with like Farsi and law. That would be a dream job, but I don't foresee that happening too soon, but maybe someday.
But that brings up a really good point, that it's, you know, it's as much a skill to use when you're working with people as it is a skill to use like when on paper of actually translating documents or making sure that the translations are as accurate as they can be and having that skill set. So would would each of you or both of you recommend a law student know or kind of have that competency in a second language? And that is a skill that our IS majors have. It's one of the requirements in our major, is that 5th semester competency of a world language. So I guess just reaffirming that it's, you know, it is valuable in the field of law.
Well, I would say absolutely. And I think when I was out in the market looking for a job, there were plenty of postings where it's like, man, requirement is that you speak Mandarin. I'm like, well, this is the perfect job, but I don't speak Mandarin. So yeah, absolutely. I think it's an added bonus that you can bring to a company. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if you want to know the truth, like especially being a law clerk is just like reading briefs and editing briefs and like knowing grammar and grammar rules. And like I was not taught any of that growing up. And the only reason I know any of it at all was learning Farsi. Like I understand grammar because of Farsi, not because of English. And so it's been like incredibly helpful for that. Even my English degree, like I don't think I ever learned any grammar. We just like read a few books and then that was it.
I think a lot of students share that experience, that you learn more about your first language by learning a second language for that exact reason. I share that experience, that I didn't know what like conditional phrases were until I learned French. I don't know. That I wasn't the only one that like missed that lesson in middle school. And Henry, I see you have a hand up, and then so go ahead and unmute yourself, ask that question, and then we'll maybe wrap up after that.
This is for Anthony. So you said you're interested in military law, if I heard that correctly. Can you describe what that is? I was sort of trying to look into like what national security law is, what their job is, their objective, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mostly just include that for, there's a lot of people who are interested in becoming JAGs, like that's one of their driving forces into going to law school. And there are programs where like the military will pay for your law degree if you agree to sign up for a certain amount of years. Those are very competitive programs actually, and you have like a way better shot of getting it paid for afterwards, like after you complete your degree, and then like going into the JAG Corps, then they'll pay for it. But yeah, like military law, so when you go in as a JAG, you can get, it's just like any military job. It's just like luck of the draw sometimes. So you can be in North Dakota just doing DUIs on base, or like your, you know, everyday like base, like disciplinary action law, or you can be at the Pentagon, you know, and like there's particular laws and how we engage other countries, like who lawful targets are, and that's constantly being shaped and reshaped to like the way wars are fought now, right? Like, so we face this world as the United States with like a very asymmetrical war that gets fought, where one side has like all of the means and the other side has none of the means. And so like, what is the law in that case? Like, how do we handle a target when they just like, it's not standing in front of each other anymore with like powder rifles shooting at each other and hoping it gets there, you know? So it can be really, really interesting, or it can be incredibly dull.
Oh, for sure. Do you have any resources you recommend to, you know, read or learn from, like when it comes to this kind of like national defense kind of law?
Yeah, have to look.
My grandpa was actually in the JAG Corps, and he was drafted during Korea, and he had to write wills for people on submarines.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of power of attorney too, because everybody gets deployed, and then their wife has to be able to, or their husband has to be able to, like, you know,
Exactly.
buy a house or do anything.
And Henry, that's a great question to kind of segue us into wrapping this conversation. I know I'm so grateful, Shabnam and Tony, for your time and kind of sticking around to answer questions. Is there, or you can share it with us too afterwards, but is there maybe contact information, or would you be willing for students to reach out to you and chat, maybe if they have follow-up questions? If that's something you're open to, we can kind of talk offline and maybe send those resources to our registrants after. But again, Tony works with the Center for Pre-Law Advising, and that link is in our chat too. So, and Henry, you can always email me too. We can get in touch and put stuff together. So I just want a really huge thank you. I don't know if you saw the chat, but we had students who had to kind of duck out early for other obligations, but they were very, very grateful for your time and your expertise. It was really helpful for them in navigating what a career in law looks like and how their international studies major and the skills they develop in that can help support their goals. It has been just a pleasure and a joy to get to know both of you more today. And I'm so grateful for your time and expertise and for sharing it with our students. So with that, a big thank you, and we hope to connect with you later on.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks. All right, we'll see you later then. Have a good night.
Thank you. Thank you.